Hello class, Mr. Fino here. This is Unit 3, Lesson 2, Learning about World Religions, Judaism. Here, this background shows a map of the diaspora, which just means how the Jews scattered around the world, in particular after they were expelled from their homeland by the Romans. So in this section, you will learn the central beliefs of Judaism and why they survived to the modern day. So those would be a belief in one God, right, which signifies um, valuing the importance of study, which is shown with this boy, um, equality and justice, which I'll talk more about with this picture, and then following their Jewish laws, which is represented by this. All right, so the first question is, what happened after King Solomon died? So we learned earlier about King David and King Solomon and their rules and their successful rule. Well, after King Solomon died, the kingdom of Israel split into two. Split into Israel in the north, which you can see here, and Judah in the south. You can see in Judah, that's where Jerusalem is located, which was the capital city under David. And what this did when these two split is it weakened the kingdom, right? So it made both halves more susceptible to attack, right? Which means it would be easier to attack them and take over, which is shown in this image here. Oops, sorry. All right, so what happened to the kingdom of Judah? So the kingdom of Judah, again, is the bottom one here. So Nebuchadnezzar, who we learned about, and the Babylonians laid siege to Judah. So a siege is like when they would camp out outside the walls and repeatedly attack to get inside and take over. Eventually, so the Jews did fight until they ran out of food, right? Because if they're laying siege to the city, they couldn't get resources, right? They couldn't get food inside. So eventually, after they ran out of food, the Babylonians broke through the wall, and Nebuchadnezzar burned down the temple of Jerusalem, which they had in there, which was built by Solomon, and took many Jews to Babylon as captives, which is shown in this image here of them marching from Israel, or from Judah. What are the four central teachings of Judaism, which we talked about? That would be number 1, monotheism, a belief in one God. 2, following Jewish teachings, which is shown with this boy. Following Jewish teachings would be this symbol here, right? To obey their God, yes or no. 3, equality and justice. So I like this picture because it shows the different levels. So equality is everyone gets the same sort of stool. Equity is you make sure everyone has the same view, and justice is you get rid of the fence altogether. You put a chain link fence so everyone can see it from where they're at. And 4 is the importance of study, which this boy is studying. All right, so let's start with monotheism. Judaism is the world's oldest monotheistic religion. Most civilizations at the time were polytheistic, meaning they believed in many gods, but when the Jews came along, they were unique, and so people didn't really understand them. So Jews believed that their God told them right from wrong, which other people at the time did not agree with. They, were not used to those types of morals, and that made the Jews different. And Jews learned these morals through sacred texts like the Hebrew Bible, the Torah. So it's important to note that Christianity and Islam both have their roots in Judaism, right? So, for example, Jesus was a Jewish man, and the Prophet Muhammad, a lot of their beliefs are rooted in Jewish teaching. So that's important to know. This picture here represents the Greek gods, right? So a lot of these early ancient civilizations were polytheistic. And here's Moses with the Ten Commandments, which are some of the laws that Jews followed. Following Jewish beliefs. So Jews follow the moral teachings from the sacred texts like the Hebrew Bible and the Talmud. For example, Jews are taught to love your neighbor as yourself, right? Judaism's oldest and best known laws are the Ten Commandments, which I'll show in the next slide. These explain how to live an upright and honorable life and maintain a relationship with their God. And over time, Jews also developed rules on dietary restrictions. So you'll sometimes hear the word kosher. That's what this is referring to. And these rules are often followed during religious holidays like Passover. So you can see here what is kosher, meaning what they can't eat. It's not kosher. So pork and rabbit, certain birds, catfish, sturgeon, shellfish, meat and dairy. And here's a picture of the Hebrew Bible. So here are the Ten Commandments. So let me just run through them real quick. So one is just you should not have any other gods over me. Their God, capital G. Should not have any graven image. So like statues and stuff that are worshiping something other than God. You should not take the Lord's name in vain. So cursing, touching God to curse words, keeping the Sabbath, keeping it holy. So that day of worship, honoring your parents, do not kill, do not commit adultery, right? Cheating on your wife or husband, do not steal, do not bear false witness against your neighbor. So don't lie to get your neighbor in trouble, and you should not covet your neighbor's house, meaning you should not want your neighbor's things. Okay. All right. Equality and justice. So Judaism has always had a code of ethics or moral values of right and wrong. Many civilizations believed that their rulers were gods, which the Jews disagreed with. Kind of like the story of Daniel in the lion's den. He did not want to, bow down to his friend, the king, so he refused to do it. They believed there was only one God who created everyone equal. Many of their writings discuss treating everyone fairly, and one example of this would be caring for the poor. So this picture here below, this is Gilgamesh from the story we saw in Mesopotamia, and he was a real ruler of Uruk, right, a Mesopotamian city-state, and he was worshipped as a god. And then here's a nice little chart showing the different facets of equality, right? Justice, legal, balance, ethics, fair, rights. Okay. Next, the importance of study. So study of the Hebrew Bible, and especially the Torah, is very important to Jews. Rabbis and scholars interpreted the Torah's teachings and passed these ideas on orally, meaning by word of mouth. They told stories. And the Talmud was created to discuss how these ideas should be applied to everyday life. So here's a picture of the Torah with, I think this is called a yad, but it's used to point and study. Here's a rabbi leading a service, and then the Talmud looks very much like law books. Like if you were to go to law school, your books would look very much like this. So I'm sure it's difficult reading to get through, to read about how their laws are applied to everyday life. Where does the term Jew come from? This is important to know because we hear that we refer to people of the Jewish religion as Jews today, but we should probably know why. So the people of the kingdom of Judah called themselves Judeans, which led to the term Jew. So Jew comes from Judeans, which comes from the kingdom of Judah, which was one of those two that they split into after Solomon. What is the Jewish diaspora? So as different civilizations conquered and removed the Jews, they became dispersed or scattered across many lands. So Babylonians came in and kicked them out, and then the Greeks came in and kicked them out, and eventually the Romans kicked them out for good. So all that movement just forced them to move to different areas around, which you can see in this map. Just the arrows, like where the Jews went to after they were forced to leave their homeland. So those Jews that did eventually return to their homeland would find it ruled by foreigners like the Romans, which made it difficult to preserve their beliefs. So they'd come home and they'd see this. They'd see Roman soldiers just on the streets, and that'd make it difficult to really go back to practicing their religion the way they did before. How did the Jews return to Judah from Babylon? So this is after the Babylonian captivity. So the Jews held captive in Babylon prayed to return home, and prophets rose to encourage their steadfast faithfulness. Right, prophets are those individuals who receive messages from their God and carry them to the people. But when Persia conquered Babylon, King Cyrus, who is right here, allowed them to practice their religion and return home, which is nice. And many ended up returning to Judah and rebuilding the Temple of Jerusalem, which is shown here. Eventually, the Greeks conquered Judah from the Persians and were harsh toward the Jews, forcing them to worship foreign gods. So more bad news for the Jews. But the Jews eventually fought and expelled the Greeks, which is this celebrated during Hanukkah, which is here you have the menorah, which is during Hanukkah. Roman rule. So though the Jews held Judea for 100 years after that, after conquering over the Greeks, eventually the Romans conquered the land from them again. So the Romans initially executed many Jews to show their power, but they did eventually allow the Jews to practice their religion. King Herod, who was given power of Jerusalem, even expanded Solomon's great temple. The Jews briefly took over the land for 3 years, right, and more war. But then the Romans launched a massive attack and completely destroyed their mighty temple. So that after that, all that remained after this attack was the Western Wall, which remains to this day. And it's an important place where Jewish people will go to visit. And after one more attempt, the Jews were expelled and banned from Jerusalem by the Romans, kind of permanently for a long time. So here is an image of the Roman attack on Jerusalem. Obviously, it looks very harsh, very cruel. And then over here, this is today. Right here, this is the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall, which is referring to all this tragedy and sorrow attached to the events that led to its destruction. But this is a very, very popular place for people to go on a pilgrimage. How did Jews preserve their religion? The Jews had their capital city and temple destroyed and were exiled throughout non-Jewish lands. So they had to come up with strategies to keep their religion going. If they didn't have the temple they went to worship in their capital city, they had to be creative. So Rabbi Yohanan ben Zakkai was an important Jewish leader. So as the Jews fought the Romans, ben Zakkai smuggled himself out of Jerusalem in a coffin, which is pretty crazy. And he met with a Roman general and received permission to open a Jewish school in a different city, Yavne. So here's Yohanan ben Zakkai as a teacher, and this is the city of Yavne, probably today. Okay. Again, so one more on how they preserved their religion. Teachers came to his school, Yohanan ben Zakkai's school, to become more advanced rabbis and then return home to lead their communities. The synagogue, a Jewish house of worship, became more important because they didn't have the one temple they could all go to. So they needed to create their own kind of mini sort of temples that they could all go to practice their religion. Rabbis created a religious service for synagogues, which is followed by the Jews, Christians, and Muslims today. So they're, the services created by the rabbis of Judaism, it's similar, if you go to Christian church or Muslim services, they kind of got it from that. And Jews have increasingly improved the rights of women over the years. And so the women have been able to preserve the Jewish faith as well, which is important. So here's a picture of inside of a temple. I'm not sure what temple it is, but it's quite beautiful. Here it looks like a service here, and then it's the symbol for women having an important role in Jewish history and preservation. So in summary, in this lesson, we learned about the central beliefs of Judaism and the ways in which Jews have preserved their religion. All right, thank you.